and welcome to this video. It's gonna be so exciting. It's out. My book is out, and here it is. I love it so much. And it is out now. I'm gonna give all the information in this video so that you can know everything, all your questions. First, the trailer is available. I will put it in the description. I made an art trailer with real artists, and it was so much work, and I would love for you to go and give it a watch. And yes, there are signed copies. I know that's a lot of you's question. So yes, there are signed copies. I will put the link in the description so that you can go and get yours. It will arrive in your hands much later, November, December. But if you want a signed copy, then this is over there. Okay. I have to say that at the end of, I'm gonna try and do this really quickly because I don't want to bore you. At the end of this, I will make I'm going to read chapter number 1 in a soft voice like this, and basically for a new membership tier, I will read the entire book in a soft speaking voice sitting on a nice like little chair, and just like, you know, making this a very relaxing way. So the membership tier is open right now, so you can go and start, you know. Every day I will put, I think that's gonna work like this. Every day I'm gonna put a new chapter. There are 29 chapters, so it will be throughout the whole month, and then you can you know, I don't know, cancel the membership or whatever. But yeah, it's very exciting. It killed my voice. Whatever. So normal copies, you will be able to find them. Sorry, this is a little scattered, but normal copies, you will be able to find them on most Amazons, Barnes and Noble, lots of like online stores. There's not physical copies that you can find in stores. I'm self-published, so it's all going to be online. So just look online, and you'll probably be able to find a copy. But yeah, Barnes and Noble has them for sure. Amazon UK has them for sure. Amazon US has the paperbacks. Anyway, like it's kind of like all over the place. Ebooks are still under review by Amazon, but they will come out hopefully during the week. I will keep you updated. Please like get on, you know, like my Twitter and stuff, because I will announce stuff on my social media, Twitter, Instagram, community tab also probably. I don't want to harass you guys on here, but so yeah, ebook. There's gonna be a full-on audiobook too, with 2 amazing narrators, and one of them sounds like Galadriel. And she's the narrator of the entire book. She does female voices, women's voices, and then there's a man for the male voices, the masculine voices. So it's really exciting. This also needs to be approved by Amazon, so I will also announce when it will come out, but you will not regret it. I can tell you, like, it is amazing. The audiobook is amazing. What else? I created an entire book channel for this because this is going to be a trilogy with an entire world that I created. And ASMR Weekly was so nice to make me an actual soundtrack for this book, for this whole adventure. So we will, we started with like 2 songs in one, and we are going to put out, you know, more and more, like as the inspiration comes. I personally have a whole plan. Good luck to him. And then I'm gonna put out background ambiences too, based on the places in my book that are gonna be animated and stuff like that. it is expensive, and it takes a lot of time to do all that, but I really want this to happen. So whenever I can, ASMR Weekly is doing the first background ambience. So thanks to him, he is amazing. It's gonna look amazing too. And very excited. So go over there and subscribe to have all this magic happen. And also, there will be, maybe some of you know that I have sent PR to like book influencers with a beautiful box and a candle inside, and like a, you know, it's like a special copy for like advanced readers. So there is a giveaway for one of these boxes. It should be on tomorrow. On the account, the Instagram account, The Nerd Fam. So I will obviously share it on my Instagram, so you will see it there. But that's a way you can get one of these boxes, because I know some of you wanted it. But I didn't make them myself. I don't have them myself, so I don't even have one of these boxes myself, and I'm really jealous. They looked amazing. There's also like little art prints. It's amazing. And yes, if you get your book, if you read and you have an opinion, or you just want to support me, a review is the best thing you can do. A review or a rating is the best thing you can do. You can leave a review on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Goodreads, and it really, really helps others, because that's how the algorithm picks up, you know, their book and helps them. So it would be amazing. And it's an advice for really every other author. Everyone appreciates a review. So thank you so much. I really hope you enjoy. The last thing I wanted to do is that none of this could happen if you guys weren't here supporting this channel, because I'm doing this job full time, that I'm able to actually sit down and write. And writing is the thing that makes my it's making me tear up. But it's when I think about writing, I really have butterflies in my stomach. I'm really excited about writing. I love writing, and it's only because of your support that I'm able to put out a book like this and do everything around it. And you know, that's a privilege. It's not given to everyone else. So thank you so much. Thank you so much. I really hope it's not going to disappoint you. I'm very aware of the shortcomings of, you know, this book and stuff like that, but I got a lot of good reviews. So yeah, I'm scared. Like, I know it's my debut, and I really think it's imperfect, but it is like, you know, it's my first story, and I really think that my book 2, I am writing book 2 right now. I'm halfway through, more than halfway, and I think I'm doing better. So I just need to learn. I am learning every step of the way. So thank you so much if you're giving me a chance and getting this book, giving this story and its characters a chance. I promise, like, there is so much in the trilogy waiting for you. There is a map. I know everyone is attached to a map, strangely, but listen, wait, I'm gonna show it to you. The hardcover also, just the map. The hardcover also is a very special, very, very, very special. It has like cute little squiggly things. Whatever, you'll probably find out anyway. I love this book. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for everything. Now I will let you listen to chapter 1. And if you want to hear more chapters, then there's the new membership tier. Cool. It's on, guys. Okay, let's do this. Thank you so much for giving this a chance. Look at the links in the description. There will be probably every info you need. Signed copies in the description, trailer in the description. click join for the new membership tier. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for everything. Enjoy. Hi, and welcome to this first chapter of my book. So I'm putting the first chapter out for everyone to listen to. I do have an audiobook. I'm not sure when it's going to be out yet. The audiobook will be with 2 amazing narrators in a normal voice, kind of acted. But I wanted to do this with my own voice and soft speaking, just in case, you were looking for a bedtime story or just anything with my voice maybe. Well, here is the first chapter of my very own epic fantasy. It's quite cozy, so that's why it really works. Alright, so Chapter 1, Odunar. Dungray stared at what remained of the exiled king. He leaned over the battle plans his advisor Forbes had laid out on a large wooden table before them. A cold wind rustled the magenta tree leaves of the island of Odunar. Nothing that either Dungray or the king could feel, however. Neither wind, heat, nor cold could trouble their skin. Sunlight never penetrated the dark, cloudless sky of the cursed land. Stained a deep navy, it always seemed shadowed by a veil and suspended into an waning dusk. Under Dungray's dark sabatons, the ground was black. Still, the foliage that grew from it and around it displayed the richest jewel tones. The idea that sunlight had no part in this beauty was inconceivable. It was all the curse's doing. Dungray watched Forbes use all arguments at hand to plead for his new plan. He always called those battle strategies. Yet all they slaughtered under his guidelines were defenseless peasants he surmised of plotting against the cursed king. And once again tonight, he wanted them to annihilate an entire village in Intoria, the central land in the kingdom of Namval. Add one more to the pile of ruins that were now their southern shores. Forbes had snuck into favor years ago by stroking the king's madness the right way. Massacres occurred only by the rumors he carried like an evil crow, whispering into the king's ear. And once again tonight, Dungray suspected he concealed his motives for picking specific victims. The cursed soldiers had killed so many that their army now comprised hundreds of glowing teal-eyed warriors. Dead warriors indeed, but they were unconquered. Each had the power of 10 mortal soldiers. Their bodies felt no pain, and their hearts knew no fear. Death was never to greet them. This was their afterlife. No survivors ever remained after a massacre. The bodies of the weak were abandoned, while those of the strong were raised as undead. One could argue it was better to be dead than to roam the lands forever as a shadow of a being, to be cursed. These people are closer than ever to finding a way here and thus accessing your power, your majesty, the crow insisted. They must die. Find a way here, thought Dungray. Only unfortunate souls and those who knew about the secrets of this land could find Odunar, and none could survive it. Indeed, the island was located at the heart of a colossal tornado, rumored to be fueled by all their victim souls. Every kill fed the land with magical energy. The storm is protecting these lands, June Grey stated with nonchalance, her expression indifferent. No mortal can trespass without dying. Phoebus clenched his jaw and set his glance on the young woman. His face suddenly grew less honeyed as exasperation took over. He hated hearing from her or about her. This little girl. He always treated her like one, even though, technically, she had 26 years behind her. Always reveled in making him appear simple-minded before the king. They had been through countless back and forth like this, and the king never failed to put an end to them. As the mightiest of all his warriors, June Grey led the armies. She had to put up with the orders of the king, who always followed Phoebus's deceitful ideas. The curse made her and the others bend the knee to any of the cursed king's wishes. Thinking of disobeying was futile. Free will was but a foreign notion. Thus, even though June Grey sometimes wanted to refuse a task because of the absurdities Phoebus whispered to the king, she had no power to ever do so. Yet she knew better than to dwell on it. Fiercely protective of the king who'd raised her, she needed no curse to show loyalty to him. Like a father, she grew up listening to him and waiting for him to come back from raids, until she was old enough that he could train her himself to be his deadliest weapon, and that he, in turn, could wait for her to return from raids. Their sorcerers are powerful, the crow snarled between his teeth. They only need time to break their way through the winds. Why, Commander, should we grant them exactly what they wish when we could simply cut off their feet before they start walking? June Grey squinted cold eyes at him. Although the advisor knew he was under the king's protection, he could not stop an unconscious shiver running down his spine. Sometimes he foresaw she would end his days the moment the king turned his back. He was well aware she dreamt day and night of unsheathing her dark sword and piercing him so deep that her hilt pressed against his body. Her dark silver hair, like that of every other cursed, and her desaturated skin tone illustrated death's kiss. Life had been drained out of her. The ghostly teal flames emanating from her glowing undead eyes shone more flamboyant than ever as they now bore into him. It would be lies to pretend those beams didn't twist Phoebus's dreams into nightmares when he caught sight of them in the dead of night. By controlling the king's actions, he had the upper hand on those lowly creatures and on the curse, and this was the leeway he needed to accomplish his own ambitions. However, the older June Grey got, the looser his grasp became. More and more she saw through him, and she too had a certain hold on the king. She'd grown up here. He'd raised her. He treated her like a daughter, and she like a father. The tide would shift sooner or later for Phoebus. He regained his composure, knowing far too well how June Grey would feed on it if he let weakness settle for too long. Much akin to a bloodsucker, his fear was her fuel, and as long as he stayed by the king's side, she'd poke and watch him bleed. Nothing in her closed face gave away the loathing in her heart, but it was clear for all to see. She was watching, like a beast waiting for its prey to be wounded, or worse, to turn its back and lose focus. The king turned away from them. "Prepare yourself," he spoke in a strong, bass voice while looking over his intricately carved and bulky pauldron. "You shall ride there tonight." Grey slowly peeled her eyes off Forbas and looked at King Huron. All she had ever seen from him under his carved navy helm were his flaming eyes, yet even those had lost a little humanity and warmth they shone with a long time ago. After all this time, she was used to the shadows. The curse forced her once again on her knees. Though raised for it, killing brought her no joy, yet it brought her no pain. Performing her duty was all she knew. The cursed had muted, distorted any kind of human feeling in all those they touched, making it easy for them to remain docile soldiers. The woman clenched her jaw as the curse crushed her will, and she put her right fist on her heart. Her dark navy armor resonated in a thumping sound. "Very well, Your Majesty," she said in a low voice. She bowed her head and turned to leave. Forbas gloated at her. "See to it that you bring your mightiest warriors," his poisonous words followed her. "These people are more dangerous than you're accustomed to." She walked away, thinking about the day she would get rid of him. Sine, her right hand, who had been waiting a few feet away, noticed her angry glare, and he set his hand on her forearm, his hooded teal eyes staring at her. A navy leather mask covered his mouth and nose at all times, yet Grey always understood his language. His eyes were telling her to not waste her mind on vermin like Forbas. Sine's village had been massacred by the cursed 6 years ago. The king himself had selected new soldiers from the dead. He picked the healthiest, the strongest, the bravest. It did not matter if they were young. Once cursed, they would develop into the most frightening warriors. The curse grew them like plants until finally they reached their peak strength potential. Sine had been one of those gutsy young people, barely 20 years old at the time, who tried to fend off the undead soldiers in vain. He'd already been strong and tall, but the curse had grown him into one of the most agile and powerful warriors. The king trusted him to stay by Grey's side, since he was almost able to match her strength and sword skills. Like him, she had grown into her prime warrior potential and then stopped aging. She had felt it a few seasons of the moon ago. No more children in Namval played with dolls or small wooden toys, while she had learned to handle a real sword. She had killed earlier than any of the soldiers in Ordinar, earlier than any in all the kingdom even. Grey acknowledged Sine's insisting look. "I know," she muttered, and her gaze fell on the silver jewels in his long grey hair. Sine was used to hearing her mutter insults and threats. He walked with her toward the camp. King Huron had him follow her every move since he had been brought into the cursed army, and his eyes always scoured everything around her wherever she went. She was so used to it that she seldom noticed now. "Fetch a dozen soldiers," she ordered. "Tell them we shall leave in a moment." At a fork in their path, Sine nodded and parted ways with her, heading toward a different part of the camp. The central part of the camp was organized around a colossal totem made out of a dark tree trunk. Had they been able to feel warmth and cold, they perhaps would have organized the camp around a large campfire. Instead, the trunk displayed an impressive carved dragon made of shadows. Its imposing wings surrounded the totem, spreading its indomitable power. Grey always felt like the dragon would come alive when she gazed upon it. Once she heard a soldier mutter, "Its eyes are always follow me." She had brushed it off as senile blabber from a soldier who had been roving the land for far too long. The same dragon head adorned her left cauldron and both of the kings. Cursed warriors who had been recruited far before her sometimes meandered about the stories of the land, including that of the dragon. About their king, however, all she knew was how he turned his back on Antoria, his own land and his people, and never spoke a word of it again. Odenar resembled a land of travellers with large tents everywhere. The cursed needed no sleep or rest, hence comfort was of little importance. The tents served only to protect weapons and armor from the elements. There was never need for food either. Dead people do not eat. All spare time was spent polishing armor and preparing for raids. Death had already taken some of them too far, despite the ghastly glow glazing their eyes, which were impossible to miss in the dusk of Odenar. They were dull and rid of life. The ones too far gone had all lost touch with reality and only answered to battle. Upon attempting small talk in the dead of night, they mechanically turned their heads to Dungrey, staring without seeing her. When their undead brains realized the woman had not mentioned blood, their heads turned back. She was used to it. She'd found it unsettling once, but now rather endearing. This sometimes pulled silent chuckles out of her, for she was at home, a dysfunctional home, but the only home she knew. The majority of the cursed were not as far gone. Still they kept the memories of their past lives, yet somehow they were unable to match feelings to those precious recollections. No sadness, no sorrow, no anger, and no joy. There was nothing in them, just like there was nothing in her. She herself had no such memories. However, these warriors once had families, spouses, children, and lives. The cursed forced them to burn bridges unconsciously, slowly, and brutally. Dungrey looked away from the dragon totem and up to the battle ring she walked. It was the favorite area, one defined by sharp stones where warriors fought each other. Since there was nothing else to do, fighting was always happening in the ring, encouraged by an aggressive roar of cheers. When Dungrey was not on a raid or preparing an attack, she enjoyed watching duels. Growing up, she had spent most of her time learning in there, training relentlessly and without pity granted to her. Now, she never took part anymore. Battling was not something she enjoyed, only something she excelled at. It was a duty, nothing more. As the best fighter among the soldiers, she was the one to decide the rank of each of them. It was fair, they would say. All now would rather impress her than fight her, so fighters in the ring showed off their best skills to get a reaction from her. It was an empty feeling, though they enjoyed battling each other regardless. And after years, decades for most, this was their only way to pass the time. They were like pirates whose only pastime was to taste rum. Just like her, they felt no joy in their duty of slaughtering mortals. Even muted, they preferred the thrill of battling each other, since not only the prey was stronger, but wherever their weapons struck, however deep it struck, no blood would be spilled and they would laugh it off. Their wounds would heal on the spot. Meanwhile, when they were ordered to kill mortals, the lives they ended would never grow back. Although unable to generate emotions, they still comprehended that much. Most of those warriors still had a mind, though forever altered and bent. However, their brains decayed more as time passed. Dungrey approached the ring, where about 24 soldiers cheered on the Hours fighters. She went up a large dark tree trunk, where some sat, observing the fight with fiery enthusiasm. Immediately, they moved over to leave her space, and she rested on the trunk, arms crossed and her teal cape floating in the winds. "Strike hard," shouted a woman to the duelist. "The commander is watching." One of the men fighting, Grey knew well. He was the heavy Raisin Denon. Raisin liked to jest and always savoured showing off his skills. Grey's usual severe posture was enough to instill fear in her troops, yet it only seemed to generate more thrill in Raisin. "This one's for you, Commander," he announced with a wicked grin, pointing his massive axe at her. The small crowd laughed as they saw Grey arch an eyebrow. She rarely considered showing off a good thing, and they knew it well. A smirk stretched the left side of her lips. Growing up, she had watched warriors boast and sooner or later be punished for it. Yet, somehow, they never learned. King Huron had taught her to loathe such an attitude. On their playground she authorized it, but on raids she let them know there was no place for it. Raisin lunged at his opponent with a powerful strike that missed, and although taken aback, his thrill did not diminish. He swung his large axe around. The small space in which they fought made the conditions favorable to such a big warrior, but too quickly he tired, for he was strong but heavy. The other combatant managed to elude the oath until the latter slowed down. If Raisin's first strikes missed, Grey knew it would be over for him. And sure enough, after the big soldier swung again and again, the other man waited for exhaustion to peak before striking him with his sword. Right between his ribs it pierced him, and everyone let out a disappointed sound. Raisin didn't flinch. In fact, he looked more annoyed than hurt. He pulled the sword from his own body and sighed while the crowd exploded in laughter and applause. There was, of course, no bloodshed, and the wound closed in the blink of an eye. Grey observed it all unfolding with no surprise. She had seen soldiers fall for this too many times. When the loser turned sorry eyes to her, she shook her head slowly, her stare impassive. She did not need to lecture him. His sheepish facial expression told her he was aware of his mistake. Besides, the humiliation he went through would be enough to teach him. In battle, there was no place for underestimation. Although no human or creature could ever match their deathly power, flamboyance was unnecessary. If magic had created them, what else could it do? The answer to that, Grey would soon find out. 2 new duelists appeared, but the commander had already turned toward a small cliff mounting above them, itself towered by tall, dark mountains. Tucked inside one of those peaks was the throne room of King Huron. It was lit only by the light of the purple moon that peeked through a large crack of the facade. The throne inside was carved into obsidian and engraved with dragon wings, while massive dragon heads adorned its arms. Of course, Grey had never seen the place herself. Those were only whispers she heard. It was said that at all times the king sat there like a sculpted part of the throne until his advisor bothered him with rumors. He would sometimes gaze upon the purple moon to feel the same coolness as when it shone upon him in mortality. He never could. Every sensation had died along with his soul, mind, and body. However, tonight the king stood atop the cliff, gazing at the moon, whose unwavering glow reflected on his dark navy armor. The dragons adorning his pauldrons were much more impressive than the one Grey bore on her left. Spikes and scales embellished his armor, and the wind blew his long black cape behind him. Through his helm, his eyes blazed an icy teal, discernible from the dark sky. Seldom had June seen him on top of that cliff. He always kept things from her. Still, nothing could extinguish the devotion that she had for him. His head turned to her, and his stare bored into the soul she didn't have. If her heart had not stopped beating when she received the curse, it now would be thundering. A chill rushed down her back, and she froze. He was far away, and his eyes spoke a language she could not decipher. The soldiers around her clapped for the new winner. "We told him not to use his right foot," commented a man while applauding. June squinted, and her mouth opened in amusement. The king turned his face to the horizon. She followed his stare, but as expected, saw only the winds intertwining. Sine appeared, obstructing her view with his height. Puzzled, he paused. He had observed her often enough to notice when something stirred her usually apathetic face. Behind him, the king had disappeared. June scanned all about the dark mountain, but there was nothing more to see. "Are they ready to depart?" she asked, quite distracted. Sine nodded and followed her stare toward the cliff with a slight worry in his eyes. June gazed for a few more seconds, then gave up to walk toward the edge of the camp. "Very well," she said, trying to forget what she had seen for now. "Let's go then." They followed the path through the forest where the group Sine had selected waited. Each of them sat atop a ravok. Native to Odunar, the beasts had dragon-like heads adorned with sharp black horns, and their feline bodies were twice as large as any animal found on Entoria. Their deep sapphire fur, streaked with glowing teal, allowed them to camouflage easily among the jewel tones of the land. The magic of the curse tamed them like loyal dogs. Every soldier owned the ravok except for Sine, who always preferred his own feet. He was almost as fast when he used his shadow form. June inspected them until Minui, her own ravok, raced to reach her. She ran her fingers across his fur, and he rubbed against her hand, rubbing his thick, cone-shaped, spiked tail around the young woman. "Let's be swift," she whispered in a somber voice. Even though the beast was colossal, she mounted Minui with ease. Her fingers grabbed his neck fur, and she launched forward, taking the lead, and their dark colors disappeared into the night. Only their dark crystal eyes glowed, and all other beasts along their path scurried away. The small troop reached the edge of the land. The torrent of winds was so strong that every plant leaned toward it, holding on to its life through its roots. Trees were entirely bent, as they had given up the fight. No creature ever ventured to the edges of Odunar. All were terrified of the tornado. June's hair flew around her. Small rocks under Minui's paws shuffled, slipping more and more towards the wind. The deluge of voices and shrieks from the slaughtered souls inside the winds blended into a terrifying moan. After crossing it so many times before, the woman's ears did not hear it anymore. Before she traversed the tornado, her body and Minui's disintegrated into a wisp of black phantom. The soldiers all did the same and slid through the powerful winds. Nothing and no one could detect them in that form. They were as unsubstantial as air. June and her soldiers arrived near a small village in Entoria. Their thick shadows dissipated, revealing their near-human forms. Their desaturated skin blended into obscurity, but the glow of their eyes contrasted in a frightening way. There were shadows with floating eyes, and that skin would make any mortal skin crawl. No one was around to sound the alarm, and even warned, there was nothing anyone could do. The messengers of death had landed, and nothing could sway death. Night cloaked the small candlelit houses, though most villagers were still awake. Laughter and folkloric music resonated through window openings. June Grey did not need to say a word. As the head of the spear, she prowled forward with Minuit, scanning the area in its every detail. As usual, the cursed never attempted to hide their presence. No witness would be left, not that it mattered anyway. As they pushed into each house, screams followed. June Grey's ears pricked like a wolf's. Dreadful shrieks replaced the joyful singing, yet they moved nothing inside her. Blood poured out of each household, whether it was young or old made no difference. The orders were clear and inarguable. None of them had the power to bargain under the curse. Some villagers could beg on their knees. It made no difference regardless. June Grey moved down the narrow street through the center of the village, glancing left and right to ensure the soldiers had not missed a home. Screams of agony from children and adults paved her way. Forbes had called them dangerous, thieves waiting in the dark to snatch the cursed king's power. Yet none of them posed much resistance. None attempted so much as a fight. More, none even suspected a thing. June Grey soldiers came out of the houses with bloodied armor. The next morning, this village would be a graveyard, and cursed soldiers wasted no time honoring the dead with a burial. All these broken souls would join the cursed realm forever and never find peace. Angry souls that would now feed the cursed magic of the king. There were more than enough already in the cursed realm, yet it kept growing and growing, enlarged by the king's bloody thirst for power and his haunting paranoia. Thankfully, the curse obliterated any form of guilt or compassion, any shred of regret in his killing machines. Humanity had been erased from their minds. Highly trained, the soldiers had executed their deeds within minutes. The village was too isolated for anyone to ever know what had happened, and yet stories always made it to the rest of the land. Terror spread like wildfire among the people. Each day, they feared being the next ones to join the cursed realm. No reason was needed anymore. Like a shadow of death, the cursed could appear and disappear in a quiet blink. Sinead came out of the house with fresh blood on his leg and gave June Grey a nod. She stopped and peeked over her shoulder. Silence enveloped the village, and all the warriors stood in front of the home they had just slaughtered. A branch cracked near June Grey. Her ears pricked toward the forest yonder. Climbing down Minuit, she scoured the dark before her, and her eyes fell on a young girl who gasped at her stare. Her blonde hair and blue irises bestowed her a sweet aura. She was much too young and innocent to witness such a horror. The girl tripped as she tried to run away. Now it was too late for her. June Grey caught up to her in a heartbeat, seized the teenager by the throat, and raised her above the ground. Motionless, she didn't blink as the child gasped her hair and turned blue.
June Grey.
June Grey broke eye contact with the girl. It was the king's voice resonating in her mind, with the wailing of the dead echoing his words. He had never called to her this way, and something about it drew a painful shiver throughout her entire body. Something felt wrong. A cacophony of different voices rose in her head. Some she recognized from her fellow cursed, and some she had never heard before. Absent-mindedly, she released her grip on the girl, who fell, and despite the pain,
got on her feet to flee to the forest. Sine observed the scene, concerned. Never had he witnessed Doongray waver in a duty. The never-ending shiver rolled under her skin. We have to go back. Right now. Sine frowned, unable to guess what went through her mind, but he always trusted her judgment. To Odenar. She commended the troop and turned to them. Immediately. Riding their Ravoks, they disappeared into the shadows and returned to what would forever change the history of Namval. So the rest of the chapters you can find in my new membership tier called The Cheesy Raclets. Click the join button below to find it. Thank you so much for all your support, and it means more than you know. This is literally my dream, so thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the rest. Good night.